When we do material studies, we have to approach it in many different angles, perspectives. The most important one, the one that we forget a lot, is not brushwork. It's not how small your brush has gone. It's not how bumpy your brush is or how smooth your brush is. It's not has nothing to do with your gradients. It has to do with the essential shape sitting underneath. So these texture studies, it's not just about surface texture. Texture studies are not, or material studies are not just about surface texture. They are about the actual three-dimensional shape of the object. Everybody write that back at me so I know you're listening. By the way, if those are on YouTube, I'm on a live stream right now. This is not a YouTube exclusive video, so I'm talking to my students in the public class right now on twitch.tv/Istebrak if you guys want to be a part of that. But texture studies are not just about the topical texture, the topical feeling of the brush. They are more than that. They are part of a big part of the three-dimensional shape, the skeletal shape that sits underneath. That plays a big role in how the texture feels and how successful the rendering is. When you have three-dimensional objects, and if they are polygons, if they are cube-based or mutations of a cube, what you get are very, very severe edges. These severe edges signal to you as the artist where the light is limited to. As we know, light is limited. Light travels in straight lines. So if something stands in the way of the light, light isn't just going to bend and then travel this way. Light doesn't do that. Light will reflect, finds an obstacle. It will jump back. It'll emit, find an obstacle, and then jump back. It'll reflect back, and that's where we get color, that's where we get lit up areas, and that's why we get shadowed areas. These lights here found a destination and jump back. When we have that, we get this part as being light. This extends all the way to the farthest edge of this object. They will find a limit and they will jump back. Some will just zip right over through and not reach the edge. They will just kind of just like graze the side just a little bit. But on the very, very edge, there will also be lights that emit and reflect up. This angle right here, this 90-degree angle that I'm always pointing to, that I'm trying to explain more thoroughly than I usually do, is what determines where you do not blend. So when you think about a texture study, this is all you have to think about. This is what you render with. This is your tool. Your tool is not your brush. Your tool is not your color. Your tool is not your reference. When you want to break down your reference, this is the tool. When you want to render something, this is what you have to make sure you're projecting in your brain and looking out for. If you don't have a word in your vocabulary, in your visual library, that anticipates the need for this lack of blending, you will create textures, as we see here, that look too rounded on the edges to be a rock. This looks more like a lump of clay that's ready to be molded. It looks like it's malleable. This looks like a bar of chocolate. Also too soft. But when we think about a rock, this rock is very, very small. When we think about a rock has very severe edges, very unforgiving edges. The way it breaks, the way the atoms are structured, is they don't break and curve off very easily. When you find pebbles that are very soft, rock pieces that are very soft, this is because of erosion. The natural way that rocks break is they break with a very severe edge, a very unforgiving edge. So what that means is before we even start thinking about our material study, we have to think about the nature of the material. Please write that. Please write that back at me. Write that back. We have to think about the nature of the material itself. I'm not asking you to memorize a periodic table, but I want you to, understand where everything sits, where the silk sits compared to rock, and how we can break it down into pieces. So when we think about a rock, we have to remember that during rendering, there has to be areas that are very severe edges that do not have any kind of gradients on the edges remember that little bit where the light travels through. If this edge wasn't there, we would have something that looks like this, or something that looks like this on the edge under the microscope. And the light would just bounce, and then this would just bounce back here. It would get like a little bit of a shadow area, so this whole area would be a bit of a shadow. There's no light landing on it. But then we'd get light back here, and this would diffuse that side of the rock. So remember that if you don't think about the edge and where it is, you won't remember to transfer that edge without gradient. You'll just jump straight into the adjacent shade. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm jumping straight into the adjacent shade, and I'm throwing that in. Actually, I'm just going to use this, my favorite brush. This is the brush I use for form studies. And form studies are amazing for learning where the shapes are in an object. I mean, it's easy to paint an orange. An orange is spherical. You just have to think about the sphere as being the core shape, the gradients being the topical behavior of light on top of that shape. And then after that, what we get is the surface texture. So you get a stipple brush and you just throw in the pores of that orange, and the orange becomes very easy. And then you think about color after that. But let's think about grayscale just as the behavior of the matter itself. So this looks a bit more like a rock to me, because what's happening is I'm adding in those unforgiving edges. So you kind of invented your own texture here by looking at this, and what we see are lots of really, really harsh edges, lots of contrast. So hard edges mean contrast. Sometimes when I ask a student to bring in more contrast in their painting, I'm not asking for blacks and whites. I'm asking for, this is contrast. Take a look, everyone. This is contrast. But sometimes if you can't use this, this is contrast. This tiny little unblended line right here, where a line would have been, is also creating contrast. Not only does it create contrast, but it creates detail. And we look at the reference again in our reading. There's detail in the fact that we haven't blended anything. When we overblend this, we no longer have that contrast that we need. So then we think, hey, I don't have enough contrast. I've overblended. You don't know you've overblended. And then you go and bring in a darker brown, which you didn't need, and a lighter mid-tone, which you didn't need in order to create that texture. And now you've escaped the color or the grayscale spectrum of that particular texture, whatever it is. This is all very general. So when you can't use this, of course, not every texture has access to black and white. Black and white, we don't really even use them in painting, so avoid that. We have to remember where not to blend. That's why here this edge is so very important. We're talking about very unforgiving edges. So we have to create those. And this feels more like rock to me now because I'm creating fissures and structure. And now I might just throw in a little bit of secondary light source here, just because the light might come in at an angle. But again, I'm not blending. I'm just creating spatial difference. Then we have the fact that this entire area here is lit up. So this whole area, we have to go back to the cube. We have to go back to form studies and remember that this all needs to be a little bit lighter than every other part. Look at the lights, the spectrum here. This is very, very high contrast. So it's not black and white, but we are bringing in a light and a dark into this image here. And remember that rocks are not see-through. If they have a color to their atomic structure, that color is the color we use. It doesn't get redder or it doesn't get yellower or more purple if it doesn't have transparency enough to do that, like skin. You can't paint rocks like you paint skin. And it's like, no duh. But you have to think about what's the color of the rock. Is the rock generally desaturated? Or is it, let me just get the lasso. Or does it have like a brownish gray to it? That's the color you stick to, and that's the color that you think about when you choose the lights and the grays. So that's what I'm reading out of this right here. So this is how you work with a reference. You have to read your references. You can't read a reference, you can't read anything if you don't have a vocabulary enough to read or understanding of the language of rendering. And this is me right now teaching you about the language of rendering. Other areas of the rock, so I'm seeing little bits of the rock break off, and I want to see the inside of those bits. So I'm breaking this piece off, and that opens up visibility to this part here. And this other side, on the other side, is facing the light, so all I have to do is really just fill this bit in, and now we have like a break on the side of that rock. And if we want it to be darker, you can make it a little bit darker. depending on how that rock behaves in that light source. I would desaturate all the way. The smoother, everyone write this back to me, the smoother the surface texture of that form study, whatever it is, the more reflective it is. So if it's a very, very smooth rock, it'll be very, very reflective. Meaning it will get like that specular addition to it. What happened? Oh, it's on color. Oops. So the smoother it is, the more reflective it is, exactly. So I'm just picking up these patterns. It needs to be a little bit lighter. And remember, your technique is in the fact that you zoom out. Your technique is in the fact that you are keeping your brush large. That's where your technique is. That's not knowledge. Knowledge is in understanding how that material behaves in that specific instance. So this is all me zooming out and using a larger brush is technique. Don't confuse that. So there's goes in and then it comes back out. So that's your bread and butter of brain fart. It's just complete. I don't know what, like, of texture studies, of material studies. That's what you have to remember and think about. These are a couple of changes. This reference is very, very small. And not everything is always so geometric. The nature it's very random. So you have to look out for the ways, yeah, the underlying shape sits, but also how it looks and if you were modeling it, what polygon you would start with. Not the most elementary version, but this rock here looks more like this kind of polygon. Right here. So if you think about this shape for this rock, this is pretty much the shape this rock has. You'll know exactly not to preserve. So this is where that 90-degree angle happens that I showed you. You'll know to preserve this as the shadow and to preserve this as light, but you will have bits of shadow in here and bits of light in here. And if you remember that again, you'll know how to lay over the texture. So that's the shape. So texture studies happens in two ways. The shape that sits underneath and the brush behavior. Brush behavior meaning the way you're holding your brush, the way you're stippling the brush, the way you're blending it with your brush. So brush behavior basically asks, what is it that's happening in this texture? Are we having hard 100% opacity brush strokes? Or are we talking about silk where we have to build up the values and build up the high points and build up the low points? Are we talking about high contrast or low contrast? All of this determines how your brush works. Alright. Oh, is it still under league? I'll change it right now. Sorry. I was leaguing last night and I lost 2 games in a row. The internet comes back and then I just lose 2 games in a row. It's just so lame. League. So creative. Done. That's worked, right? It's fixed it? I hope it's fixed it. But yeah, that's it for texture studies. So we're going to have to think about all of this. Remember, embed this in your brain. It's the shape and then the brush behavior. This comes first. This is number 1. This is number 2. If you separate these two, your image will look a lot, the texture you draw will look a lot more clean. It'll look a lot more familiar. If you confuse these two, you'll try to do both at the same time. Can anyone answer why it's bad to try to do both at the same time? Why is it bad to confuse those two? The rage. Oh my god, yeah, the league rage. Stupid Vlad. Anybody who plays Vlad is a boob. Anybody who plays Vlad should just leave my stream right now. Hate Vlad. Why is it bad to mix these two levels together? Why is it bad to confuse them? The form comes first. You need to start simpler. Yeah, but what does it mean when you're mixing the two together? What happens? Ew, I drank from the wrong teacup. Gross. I drank from 2-day-old tea. No, I'm a very clean person. I just have like 17 cups of tea on my on my desktop because the shape affects the color and the value. How so? How so? I mean, I can sit here and explain it to you, but I want to know that you guys are also thinking about the repercussions of missing and messing up these two very, very pivotal points in rendering. You want to learn how to render, this is how you render. This is the answer. How do I render? This is the answer. Shape first and then brush behavior or texture behavior. So why is it bad to confuse the two? What happens? I'm very clean, except to leave 17 dishes on my desk. If you don't separate, you're not going to recognize the value and color of the texture. The shape and how it affects those two will mud things up. That's true. Form equals angle of lighting, which equals color value. Very good. If you're confusing these two at the same time, what happens is you're not giving enough attention to the light source, meaning you're not creating a light environment. Light behaves very differently with different kinds of textures. So if we're thinking about mapping out where the light can travel on this odd little shape right here, let's try to make sense of this shape. Okay. Oops. Alright, so if we have this basic polygon, it's supposed to be some weird sculpture. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Alright, so we found this weird ass shape and we want to make it into some sort of diamond. So let's some sort of cool shape of like a gem or a magical gem or a weird building. I don't know, man. What would happen is we would have to map out how the light travels on this object first. This is why form studies are awesome. They're nondescript form studies. Basically, it's the form, it's the texture study without the texture. It's just all form. It keeps you always thinking about where is the light source? Where is the light source? That's the question you always ask when you're trying to draw anything. That's why, I don't know, like when God created the common theory, I guess, is that let there be light allowed the universe to be visible, so how else would the universe have been visible if there was no light to reveal it? How are you going to draw anything in the universe if there's no light to reveal it? How are you going to draw it well if you're not thinking about the behavior of light and light in its basic core character? If you're muddying this step with this step, you're not giving enough attention to what this step is offering you. It's offering you a way out of the issues you might experience if you're thinking only about this. And here's another scary, scary cautionary tale. Some people skip this step and go straight into this. Some people think it's good to do texture studies like this. Circle, and then the texture inside. Cube, and then the texture inside. Like, what? Like, I saw some really ridiculous texture studies on Google. I looked them up. They tried to fit an orange into no, that's so stupid. Into a cube. So they did that orange texture study into a cube or like a watermelon or something. There are cube watermelons out there, but that's not what we're trying to explain here. What we're trying to explain here is real world texture behavior on real world polygons and real world form. So actually, if you see a cube, draw the cube. If you see a sphere, draw the sphere. Don't muddy the two up. And don't skip this level. And don't depend on this level. You can probably have a texture that reads way better if you spent more time on this and just use your brush behavior or brush settings, and little textures they have on it. Mess around with sharpen tool and you've got some rock texture. But this would be useless if there was no cube on which this can sit. Alright, so this will offer you actually more than this does. So that's something big. And I don't know I don't know, and I'm not trying to measure my merit here or tell you guys you need me, but if I just had that when I was younger, if I just had someone who told me that, it would have been, I don't know where, I think I'd be a much better artist today. Because I spent so much time thinking that the smaller my brush was, the better I painted. The easier it would be to render anything. I could render anything. I had to memorize rocks. I had to memorize how the brush behavior of silk or the brush behavior of apples. That's not how it works. It's all about the shape. Remember that. And that's the problem with all of these here. There is not enough attention on how the shape is behaving with the light source or the under the form structure. So this can't be blended. There needs to be no line here. This can't be blended with this. And we're already getting a better feel from this rock. Another massive thing that thinking about this polygon, that weird little polygon I drew before, it lets you know and map out where cast shadows are. Cast shadows are very important. Nearly all of these here, all of this is a cast shadow. This right here, let me show you where these cast shadows are. If you don't have a vocabulary for cast shadows, you're not going to see them in your reference. You're going to think they're shades. No, cast shadows are cast shadows. They're taking the shape of the edge from which they're cast. This is a cast shadow. This right here, this is a cast shadow from this piece on this piece under it. This is a cast shadow. This on this piece. That's why mapping out in 3/4 view will help you draw a much better, I guess, form structure, but you'll also think about light behavior. So cast shadow here, cast shadow here, throw this here, a nice clean edge here, and that rock is not looking, is it not looking better? Because we're thinking about all of these different characteristics working together. Characteristics of light sources, characteristics of the form and the brush behavior that reflects the texture. And then there's color. There's another fucking layer to think about. And that's just what makes our lives so much harder. So we don't saturate shadows of textures. This redness right here, this is just like pigmentation or some sort of compound in the rock or something. This is not because shadows get redder on rocks and get yellower on rocks. No, rocks are very dense. Light has a very little chance to play on these rocks. It's not a playground for it. Rocks are very not fun for light. But skin, yeah, skin is very fun for light. Okay, so what we have to do is desaturate these shadows. We chose this as the base color. You have to think about what the base color is and just throw that over the shadows, or else the rock will look like, I don't know, some non-rock thing. And anywhere where there's just a little bit of sunlight, you can afford, and I give you the green light, to throw in just a little bit of yellow. You can throw in some yellow. Right here, let me see if I can get the full 10. Yes. You can throw in just a little bit of yellow, not too much. And that would mean a white yellow. So we're moving up along this grayscale. We don't want to saturate, but we're also moving just a little bit along the yellow to get that white. And we're not using all of that white, we're using some of it. And the reason why we're using such a light white is because of the fact that the rock is very smooth, or smoother than usual. I mean, this one has lots of surface texture, but again, it's still smooth in certain areas. And I'm going to desaturate with the with the sponge. Just enough yellow. And remember, things are brighter the closer they get to the light source that's on them. So this little bit here actually would be just a little bit brighter. I'm using the wrong kind of lasso here, man. Just a little bit brighter up here on this piece of the rock. Then maybe some more shadow there. So the closer this side is much closer to the light source than this side. This would get more contrast than this here. This has less exposure to the light, a lot more dynamics and stuff getting in the way than here, where this is all open space up here, allowing the light to cast more. Okay, so that's all what's guiding me around this this form study, this texture, is breaking these two pieces apart, thinking about the texture and breaking it apart. Don't think you'll understand the texture of an object if you just throw it into a sphere. It's not going to work like that. You're going to understand very topically. At that point, you're micro studying just the topical texture behavior. You're not understanding the form involved in texture studies. Alright, so let's look at this piece here. It's nice that you started off like from piece to piece so you understood how it would. I really love this study pattern right here. It's thank you for not staying just in circles. Thank you for developing it. But over here, this person analyzed what is expected of their brush. So yeah, it was just a topical experimentation with how the color and the values and the gradients develop. And then he took it to the most basic shape, which is really awesome, along a line of where the light sits across. Let me get the lasso going. Select inverse. And then again, I'm building it up here. And the most intense point of the light traveling across the silk. Has it connected again, guys? Because I think Twitch chat needs to be reopened for me, so I don't see your comments, but I continued because of the recording. So I continued teaching, but you'll see the bits that you missed on YouTube. Okay, so it's back. I have to restart the Twitch chat. I'm not seeing any of your comments. But whatever you missed, you'll see it on YouTube. So basically, just to sum up, we need to go darker and we need to go lighter. I'm using dodge tool so that I could speed this up. I'm going to run real quick dodge tool over this bit here. And then I'm going to use burn tool. I'm going to go over these and desaturate because burn and dodge tool on highlights and shadows respectively do not listen to realistic saturation. They oversaturate. So I'm darkening only the darkest areas. There isn't much secondary light source here. You've added a secondary light source. There isn't much of that happening here. It's such a dark color. It's such a saturated color. We get very, very little secondary light source. All you really have to do is just build up the shadow. Sorry about that lasso job. All you have to do is build up the shadow. And that's how this texture specifically is behaving both in color and in value. Not much secondary light source. Very little over here because it's directly beside a really exposed area. So here and here there wouldn't be much of that. I'm going to darken this side. But yeah, anything you guys missed, it's available on YouTube. Sorry about the storm. It's going to keep raging, and I think I'm going to disconnect like 7 more times tonight. So there's that. And the color itself doesn't really, so it got saturated here. What I have to do is go back and desaturate what dodge tool and burn tool did. Because that's not the kind of silk it is at this point. It's behaving very conservative to its palette. And it's very, very well blended. This is a very tedious kind of texture where you have to make sure you're blending. I think I'm going to use the mixer tool. I never use it, but I'm going to use it in this case because that is really what's going to do it here. There we go, beautiful. I'm using it on shift. This is another technique, so this is a technique of mine here. I use shift tool to make straight lines. As I do the straight lines, so this is pretty much what I'm doing. As I do the straight lines, it blends on a straight line, and because there's so many straight lines in this rendering job, I don't have to use my brush. This is just a Photoshop trick. If this is traditional, you're going to have to go in there and use some elbow grease. Okay, so just blending all the way up, blending the shadows. So this is this is the only way I use a mixer brush. I really don't use it in any other way. It's just, that's the only use I have for it. Everything else my brush can do. But sometimes I just don't have patience for straight gradients. Gradients are a pain in the behind. The settings of my mixer brush they look like this. Alright, so it's just on 80%, 75%, and 90%. I think those are the default or the ones that I customized. I'm not sure, but they're perfect for me. Another thing that I do is I use shift. So I'll use shift. So it's just to make a straight line. You just have to, I don't know what's happening here. Dark, 100%. Deselect. There we go. So I use shift to get straight lines. This is what I'm going to do with my brush, not my mixer brush, just brush. I'm going to use it to get those really tight dark lines that sit right beside the highlights. And that's really essential. That's kind of there's a little thing called just the texture, there's just like a minor little thing that the texture does that makes it that much more recognizable. And this is what that texture does. I'm going to go back to mixer brush, and I'm going to mix again. Oh no, you have to select the color you want mixed, by the way. The clicker. Okay. There we go. Can't choose a dark color or else it'll really mess up. Alright. And then I'm just going to follow up with the outline. This is where the form study comes back in. This little bit that I'm doing right here, this is going back to the cylinder. So this is the form stage, back to the cube form. This little cylindrical sphere at the bottom makes this more custom recognizable as a form. So I have to do that. And then I'm going to use dodge tool one more time for those really light areas. Again, just a straight line. Just like that. And then sponge, actually, no. Select inverse, hide, color. Very conservative color we have here. It does have navies in it, but it's usually just a gradient of one color. Very little saturation at the shadows or the highlights. It's very specific to the gradient of the texture, those tiny little fibers used to make that silk. So let's go back to the befores. Before, after. Necessary amount of contrast needed for this specific texture. We think about it because we've observed it in our reference, we've read it in our reference. You have to grayscale to really read it and see the jump in the contrast. Darks are sit right here in this texture. Get rid of the color. Right here, and the lights sit all the way up here. That's really high. And again, really good job with this. I like how you've analyzed specifically what your brush is supposed to do. Analyze what your brush is supposed to do on the basic form, so it's cylinder. If this is jumbled up, sitting on a flat surface, but if it was cascading and falling from something. As for this glass piece here, what we don't recognize sometimes is that when we're talking about a glass piece or something that has a background to it that is see-through, what we have to do is bring in the background color. So this is see-through pretty much, and reflective too. You see the distortion of the image on it, so you're going to have to find an image to distort. It's got the specular highlights here, outlines of the rest of the image as it's distorted, so it's pretty much a mirror that is spherical and transparent. So those are the three things that you credit to this texture. These are the three things that you have to say, okay, this is the brush behavior. Obviously it's a sphere, so it's very easy to determine its 3D underlying shape. And what's next is just bringing in the background color. If the background was light enough to cause this much reflection, it would have to be much lighter than the background you've currently chosen. So what I have to do is change the background surrounding this. So I'm going to choose something that's a little bit lighter. If the room was this dark, which is really dark gray for a room, we would not see this much on this object. We would see very little. So we have to lighten up this background just a little to prove that this specular really did happen. Do you guys see what I mean? Can anyone explain what I just said? Select inverse. Okay. So I'm going to get the background color, and I'm going to slowly center it around the middle of this object. This sphere you've drawn, this glass ball, is darker than this one. So either you lighten this one up, darken only around the areas you know where that object is reflecting some images. And these images have to be drawn on with a hard brush, or else they don't make any sense. And then raise this value all the way up, because that's the only way, again, it'll make sense. And this glass ball now feels like a glass ball, because we've thought about the light source. Hey, where's the light source? What's it doing? What is it doing to the room? We've thought about the texture's essential behavior. What is it? It's transparent and it's reflective. And we've thought about the specular highlights and the topical texture. It doesn't have a texture. This is this is zero texture. If this is like 90% texture, this is zero, because there's no bumps and bruises on this. This is perfectly smooth. It's glass. And that makes it very, very reflective. Not only reflective and have shiny bits, but reflective enough to be a mirror. And that's why mirrors reflect us. That's why mirrors show our image, because they're so smooth. The light that travels around the room, when it hits the mirror, we see our image perfectly, because the light carries our image with it. It carries the edges that we have on our body, carries the edges in the room, carries the shadows with it. So that's why we're seeing an image in a perfectly flat mirror. That's why we can see our reflection. That's how light works. Light carries images that enter our eyes, that reflect off objects. So that's the nature of this texture right here. And then I'm just going to add in, let me see, did I deselect? Yeah, I did. I'm going to add in just the surrounding lights that sit on the edge, just along here. If they do. I mean, it really depends on the kind of material it is. Nope, not all the way to the shadowed side. So it's still a 3D object though. It's still going to have a light side and a dark side. And I would throw just a shadow very gently. So do you guys want to see the before and after? What have I covered so far? Let's talk about what I've covered so far before I jump into the before and after. Can anyone summarize it? Faz, care to summarize? Yeah, I'm looking at you in the background. Sitting in the back of the class, probably browsing Imager. Kuro says bright highlights equals bright light source, which equals bright environment background. Exactly. The room is bright. We have to not only think about the colors in the object, but the colors surrounding the object. The light surrounding the object. How much light is really in a room. Everyone write this back at me, and I want you to imagine this forever and always, and never blow this image out of your mind. It'll make you render better. Light is an invisible fog. It's not a fog or a glow in its nature, but it acts like it sits around everything like a fog. It comes from a light source. It does travel in straight lines, but it's straight lines if you really peer in with a microscope. We can't. But if you just, if you could see the actual ray of light, which you can't, but that's what it is in theory, and the way it behaves. But it's like a fog. It's everywhere. It does come from a direction, so that's why it casts shadows. So it's not a fog in the way we see fogs, the way fog is, and something that desaturates and distorts, but it's everywhere in the room. It casts shadows, it casts secondary light source, it reflects off other objects, or it saturates colors, it desaturates colors, or its lack of presence desaturates colors. If you think about all of that as a light environment, this is the key term that I use, a light environment, you will always draw better. So you see, these are the bits right here. This is the secondary light source. This is the shadow side. These are the specular potential, and this is the see-through. So we see part of this color in the background. Part of this color here is reflecting on through here. And that's what we have to do with this piece. We have to make it light enough, bright enough, and we have to make sure the sides, everything on the side here, is going to be difficult to select. Everything on the side here, either on a light side or a dark side. So this is all the light side, and this is all the dark side. And then we have the secondary light source, so the white of the room. So this room also has to be light. Select inverse. This room has to be lighter. This is the room that we're looking at. In your reference, everyone write this back. In your reference, look out for the color of the background. No, wait. Look out for the value of the background when you're doing a reference, because that'll tell you how light you can go. Your eyes will naturally want to draw something that looks a little bit darker because the gray you chose in your background was not a friendly gray. Okay, and then we've got the really white whites that reflect off on the side, just like this. And that texture feels a lot more realistic. The white probably on the ground that it's on is also casting some light down this way. So a lot of what goes into textures comes from the shape. The shape tells us the direction of the light, where the direction of the light is coming from. After we determine that, we know where the shadows are, we know where the reflective points are, and then we know whether or not, by observing the topical texture behavior, we know whether or not this has a high specular potential or a low specular potential. Do I need some serious stippling brushes for this, or do I need some really good blending brushes? What kind of texture am I looking at? Do I need a hard brush? Can I use a soft brush at all? You can't use a soft brush on a rock texture. You've chosen three very extreme versions of material here, and they're all gonna kind of just throw you off. So try to focus on one, see how much you can learn from one. It's different, that's why it's so important to have an art community. It's different when you have someone else coming in and telling you, hey, think about a rock and then think about the silk. It's hard for someone to kind of keep you in perspective and keep you in check. I have some blue on that, I'll fix that in a sec. But keep painting them. Don't forget to think about the fact that you're going to have to try it maybe 6 or 7 times before you get it right, before you read the form properly, before you create a beautiful synergy between your understanding of form and then your brush behavior. Brush behavior, there's a massive obstacle between you and brush behavior, and that's your technique, the way you hold your pencil. Lack of technique means lack of understanding of brush behavior or reading. Maybe you know how the rock looks and how it should be painted, but you just don't have any technique with a hard brush. You don't have any familiarity with a hard brush. You don't know what to do with a hard brush. The only technique you have is probably with soft brush. So you need to understand, you need to have some familiarity with what's needed of you in order to recreate this texture properly. Some confidence as well. A lot of confidence in working with a hard brush when you need it. Not fearlessly not blending. Fearless edges are needed. And then some very patient tempered gradients for anything that's soft and reflective. Those are massive technique changers, game changers here that you guys have to develop in your personality and the way you are when you draw. Fearless when it comes to hard edges and very patient when it comes to soft edges. And I think that's it. I'm just going to do a little bit more blending here. Do you guys have any questions? Any questions at all? This area here is, I got the soft brush. I'm still working on the entire lines thing. What do you mean entire lines? So this is where it's brightest, that's where it's going to get the most reflection. Nope, that's too bright. I'm just continuing this. It doesn't feel right to me unless I finish it. Kind of a perfectionist. And then I'll just darken that as needed. So I'm not sure what else I really have to do before we get the subscription button. On Twitch. I don't know if you guys are, if you guys need it. Like, I don't know really if we need it at all, but I do want to get it. I want to strive for it. So if you guys can talk about this class to your friends, introduce it to your classmates, something so that we can grow a little bit and we can kind of become a full channel. That'd be cool. This side of the cylinder is all spherical, so we wouldn't really get one side that is dark, light, dark. We would get one side that's light. Sorry, I'm focusing a little bit on only one texture study homework, but it did get you guys to paint, and I will try my best to look at them next week if you guys have any more for me to look at. But let's see what everyone else is saying about what they learned. In your reference, look out for the value of the background. Look out for the value of background. Very good. I'm still working on it. No confidence in my lines. My drawings are very rough. Yeah, backwards moving lines, like chicken scratch lines that move backward, like recursive lines, is very bad, yeah. You're going to have to invest some speed in your brush strokes. Speed will really produce much smoother lines. Sorry, the more I look away and look back, the more like I find some other stuff I want to change. So there we go. I don't know. Maybe that. Maybe this. Maybe this. I'm not sure. Maybe just this. No. I don't know. I'm just taking my time at this point. Yeah, that is what it's supposed to do, Pineapple. It just notifies you. By the way, guys, turn on your notifications so that you guys can get the announcement for my channel. You can contribute. Have you contacted Twitch about it? I have, and I have contacted the Photoshop Twitch channel. Maybe they'll give me a, like, I don't know how that would, I don't know. I think if they give you a feature, you'll get more viewers, and if you get more viewers, Twitch notices and gives you the sub button. But I don't think Twitch is just going to give me the sub button without 100 average viewers. Oh, hi, Joseph Cow. Yes, I am. Thank you for the homework. Thank you for the opportunity to teach. The more you guys give me homework, the more I can teach you. It was me who was like, woo, on YouTube. Was it? Thank you. Best thing about subscribing to a person who draws well is high chance the emotes will be good. The emotes? Do you use any plugin for Photoshop lines? For me, lines are very wobbly in Photoshop, but not at all in Sci or CritiqueHour or Clip Studio Paint. Clip Studio smooths your lines. Sci smooths your lines. I don't know about Krita. But Xren, you might have jitter on in your brush. High jitter means your brushes will be a little bit jittery. Let me test what my brushes do right now. Excuse me. If I draw really really slowly, it'll just capture all of the minor jitter. Do you see these points here? It'll capture all of that. But if I draw very fast, I give it a very little chance to mess up my lines. And that's what I usually do. I draw very fast. And it's not just drawing fast, it's drawing fast on a couple of shapes that I throw in first. I have to just choose the shapes, and then drawing fast gives me those really smooth lines. And that's how I get my smooth lines, at least, because now I know the shape I need. I have the shapes to guide my lines, so the anxiety is lessened. If you have a high jitter in your lines, it means your anxiety is really high. You don't know what you're drawing. If you don't know what you're drawing, your lines are going to look very, very nervous. Oh my god, I'm drawing the face now. Oh my god, I'm drawing the eye. It's just going to turn very, very sad. Very, very unhappy lines. But if you have a shape to guide you, you'll draw very, very nice, smooth lines. Okay. Yay. Alright, let's see. Yeah, check jitter. Istebrak, there are a lot of people who get the button without 100 concurrent viewers. Really? So how do I go about that? Do I just contact Twitch? I'll probably just have to contact Twitch. There are some exercises you can do to build up confidence. The best one I know is just getting a paper, a gray canvas, and just filling it with circles. See how well you can draw a circle. If you can draw that, you can draw it and then try to draw lines upward. This really messes with your with your bad habits. It really fixes them. Draw some lines that go downward. Draw some straight lines. See if you can draw some straight lines. And all of this requires speed. Not the drug, the motion. Speed. Alright? You need some speed. I will message Twitch. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you guys for that. So you guys are masters. So let's take a look at the before and after. Everybody ready? Also the one when you draw a line and do it again over the first one. Yeah. There's a what's it called? A thingy where it measures how accurate your circle drawing is. But yeah. Draw a box. Lesson 1. I've been doing a lot of these lately and the circles really help too. Awesome. Thank you, Pineapple. You were hoping for drugs. Okay, so before, take a look at the color differences, the structure differences, how, does it feel like a rock early on? Are you really using the edges that you're supposed to be using? Is the brightness, is the light present? That's the biggest question. That's what you have to ask. Is the light in the picture? Is it present, or does it always feel like you're drawing an overcast? There's no light presence in your drawing. And that's because you're not thinking about the shape first and then the brush behavior. Light presence here, the light is sort of centered around one area, and that light travels along that one area and makes it really bright. The brightest point in this entire thing is just right along this here. So that travels all across. That's where we get the most contrast. The darkest blacks and the lightest lights just travel along this line. So we find a line that it travels across, and we make it bright enough. The background here might have to be a little bit lighter. Just choose a generally lighter background, because the room is, we have to know how bright the object is and how bright the room is, or else we won't know how light to go, and if there is even a light environment. There won't be a light environment. Remember that you want to think about the actual color. So this is discoloration, but the rock itself is very, very gray. So adding the right color also helps the read. It helps with the read of the object. So throwing this over here feels more like a rock now. Or maybe even half the color that you had. Don't throw warm colors where cool colors usually sit, or desaturation usually sits. Desaturation and coolness are kind of interchangeable in art. And this is a lot more broken, so you probably want to have a little bit more broken pieces here and there. Like more blemishes in the rock surface. And that's it. Any questions at all about material studies? This is amazing, by the way, but remember the gray background, that rule I just stated? The gray background will not help you understand how the light behavior is traveling on this object. If this room was this dark, we would not have these reflective points. We would have a much darker side here, more shadow along here, and the light would be centered only on one side. And this would be much darker and focused on a hot point. Now it feels like this little glass thing is in a dark room, where before it felt like it was in a really bright room, because that's the reference you were using. It had a bright background or bright wall behind it that we need to see its color. That's adding to the fact that all of this little white stuff here is the background coming in and distorting. And look at how straight lines distort on this kind of uneven glass. Remember the mirror. The more distorted the mirror, the more distorted its reflection. Everyone write that back at me. And I'll know who's not listening by those who don't write it back. Okay. So remember that the environment plays a role and the values that you choose. Okay, let me run over this one here. Some of these require micro textures, so your brush has to be like 1 pixel, and you really have to do that. You got to go in and darken your shrink your pixel. Right here for fire is like, if you want like the best tools to paint fire, it's pretty much dodge and burn. And what you're trying to do is create the amount of contrast that happens when something is like burning, actually turning black, versus the bright fire that it's sourcing from it. So you're going to have to find a balance between both. God damn it, Photoshop. And like the hot spots here. And then you have the general glow of the fire. These are bad references. This is not a real fire and light environment. There would be a glow around the fire. I'm going to get a soft brush. Go it over. Oops. Maybe I'll choose that. And then erase away the middle. So that's what fire does. It creates a light environment. This is a light source. This is a light source. You can go into no man's land. By all means, I invite you into no man's land. This is no man's land. The only time you're allowed to use no man's land is if you are looking at a light source. Since this is a sphere, you really are just looking at like I mean, gold can be made into spheres, but remember that it eventually reaches the highest point, which looks very, very close to white. So it gets a little bit desaturated because it's so reflective. It'll reflect some of the light source's color. So I brought in some white over this gold. And on the darks, I'm going to use burn tool. Burn tool is going to bring in the saturation necessary. And I'm going to make it just a little bit redder in the shadows. Just a little bit redder. Remember, you can't have gray yellows for gold. It doesn't work like that. There's a lot of red in the shadows of gold. This is very well done. This is very mattified, but this is much more cool than this. That's just how, I guess, is that a bone? It's a little bit more cool, closer to pink at the top. Very little saturation, very little transparency. The more dense it is, the more cool it is. Over here it looks like crumpled paper, and this goes back to that shape first. The polygon we're looking at here is very particular. There's this side right here of that right angle. So this is the cube right here. If we were to like carve it down, this would be the cube, and we don't have any of that here. That's why I'm saying rocks need courage. Rocks need some real balls in order to you have to have rock hard balls in order to paint with the hard brush necessary for recreating this texture. Because you cannot blend. There is a line here, and it's a very specific line that we cannot blend. This line is here, this little side bit. When we zoom in, it looks like a stairway. This is the top part. This is A and B. A, and then it goes down the stairs. B, and then down the stairs it's just shadow. So it's not a line. It's a de-elevation. It's a depression. And then there's another bit behind it. So there's a lot of shape that goes into, this is very well done. You actually had the shape in there. There's a lot of shape that goes into developing forms and material studies. Please don't forget about the three-dimensional shape. You should not have done a sphere if you were looking at a reference for gold and cubes. And you should be studying how gold behaves in cubes. If you wanted a sphere, you should have looked up how gold behaves in a sphere. Don't do, everyone write this back at me, don't do material studies in spheres. Please don't do that. That's not how it works. We need the cube in there. The sphere is not going to teach you about this 90-degree angle. The cube is going to teach you about that necessary 90-degree angle. Crumpled paper, rock, because there is a missing cube factor in this. Alright. Again, this is back to micro texture. Sometimes you just have to bring in a texture or a stippling pattern that will create that necessary pattern for you, or else it will not read. So I'm going to get this. That reads a little bit more like broccoli, because that's the behavior of that texture. Okay? Micro texture sometimes is needed. Sometimes an excess level of sharpening is needed, so contrast and brushwork. So if I filter, sharpen, unsharp mask, and raise that all the way up. Oops. Filter, sharpen, unsharp mask. And raise that up a little, it'll feel more like ice. Or it kind of feels like sugar right now. I think ice would be a little bit more bright. It will have a really, really much higher specular highlight. So I'm throwing in a little bit more brightness here and there to show where that highlight sits. And then filter, sharpen, sharpen more. No. Filter, sharpen, sharpen. We just need more texture. So instead of depending on the sharpen filter, you can really benefit from working with a hard brush where you need it. Ice, rocks, what else needs hard brush when you paint? So before, after. What else needs a hard brush, guys? Before, after. Reads much better. Very smoky looking fire. Necessary amount of contrast. We did the before and after for this. And then this silver studies here, you kept the line. You know what you have to do? You have to replace that line, that black line, with a white shade. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use darken layer, bring in a gray, and replace that black line with a white line, because that's what I'm picking up out of these. The edge has the white line on it. There is no black line, it's just a gray shade, an edge. And if I place in this white line, it'll feel a lot more like the texture that it is. It's a little bit too soft because it's such a small picture. You need to give me like really much better quality. You need to upload it in order for me to be able to paint the best. Okay, this side here faces the side, so it's going to get some light on it. This is what you do. Replace those the black lines with white lines. And that's going to, nice job bringing in the color of the ground in here. Very, very good job. Also, this black line, just get rid of it or lighten it because you don't need it. This is line dependency. You read form, you read texture, but you've got a little bit of line dependency. Sorry the class is a little bit long. There's a lot of homework to look at today. It's more info for you. It's more info for you. Okay, we're just getting rid of those lines that we don't need. And that's it. I'm sorry I keep saying that's it, but that's it. Don't be intimidated. Always remember, for the sphere, lube the cube. Fear the sphere, lube the cube. I said that in Burmese. I was taking the ice on the fish ice there, which didn't look so sharp to me. Am I the only one that paid to join? You paid? What did you pay for? There's a Google community page for critiques. Just show up. So yes, stick around. I will explain what this class is all about for any newbies. So I am Istebrak, and I run a critique class on Twitch, and I cover everything, and I upload the videos on YouTube. I record them and upload them on YouTube. This is my website. If you guys are interested in private tutoring, I offer private tutoring. It's not for free, but it's very specific to you and your goals as an artist. And it's like critique hour, but it's a lesson and a critique hour of your homework. It's daily homework, and it's dedicated to you and what you want. So private tutoring is available here. I have some quotes from people who have taken it with me. If you guys are interested in the books that I have written, they pretty much cover the stuff that I talk about. It's available on the store. These are not necessary. You don't have to purchase private tutoring or the books. I have an app that is coming up. So before I get to the app, let me just link you guys the Google community. If you want to submit homework for the themes, next Thursday, this Thursday is still critiques on material studies. You still have to do some more material studies. I want someone to take on some like scale armor. Like go for it. Go for something really difficult. Like today was a lesson in critiques. Next week will just be all critiques, and it'll probably be an hour and a half again. So please try something crazy. Try something that you've never tried before, because I'll be there and I'll critique it for you. So it won't be a lost cause. It won't be a lost study. You don't have to feel like a failure. You don't have to feel like this is too difficult. We're in this together, and we're all taking it together. And I want to see what happens when someone who isn't ready for some scale armor or for some crazy metallic armor to take it on, and we're all there learning with you. So it's a great opportunity, and I appreciate anyone who tries something crazy for Thursday, so we can take that on together. So for Thursday the 14th, don't forget there's a more material study class and discussion. Try something crazy. If you guys want to follow me, please subscribe on Twitch. If you guys want to get the YouTube class or watch the class again on YouTube, please go to YouTube and subscribe there. Leave comments, get active on YouTube. It's nice, So I was just going to watch the videos and not leave me any feedbacks. I'd love to hear some feedback. I announce on Twitter. Anyone is interested in following me on Twitter, if you're a Twitter user. I also have an Instagram if you guys want to just catch my sketches or something, but that's social stuff. And let's talk about the upcoming Portrait Studio app. So if you guys wanted your homework, by the way, you just have to message me on Facebook. I'll link you guys Facebook in a second. Yes, so don't forget about everything today, please. When you do your classes, cancel. I think I just not saved one. Yes. Yes. Oh God. Oh, I didn't touch on the hair. Damn it. I'll do it next week. But let's talk about Portrait Studio. So it's an app. Some of you already know about it. And extract here. What is this? Why is it taking so long? And this app is awesome, like I was talking about in the beginning of the class. It allows you to customize and generate references for portraiture. Meaning you have control over the camera, control over the facial features, so you can adjust the facial features to be to your taste. And you can adjust the light source, so you can direct the light source however you want on your reference. It's a 3D model of a male and female bust, including the chest. And it's just great. It's gonna change the way we draw. It's an amazing learning tool as well, because being able to control the camera is really good for those who are taking on face rotation, faces that rotate. And 3/4 view is a very, very difficult study topic for some of you. It's very hard for you to imagine how the face rotates from front view into 3/4 view. So seeing that gradual rotation is going to teach you guys about rotation. Rotation is one of the topics, unit studies that I do in my private tutoring and in my private practice. I cover rotation. It's a very specific topic when it comes to portraiture, being able to rotate and compress as you need to. So this program, not only will I use it for my own painting, but I use it in my classes as well. So let me show you what it does. It will be released within a month's time to a month and a half, depending on obstacles that might come up. We are getting into beta testing, so we will get into beta testing, but we're kind of transferring from beta into alpha right now. From alpha into beta right now. It's really improved since we last looked at it. So this is the light source. We have two light sources. This is so that you can move the light source. And let's take a look at what we have control over. We have control over the first light source. And we have control over the intensity of the second light source and the first light source. So all the light source, you have control over the intensity involved. To move this light source, all we have to do is move along an X and Y axis. I don't think I have X and Y here. Oh yeah, I do. And what that does is it cancels out the core shadows caused and diffuses the core shadows caused by the primary light source. And that's referencing right there. You can turn off the numbers if you don't like the icons. You can turn those off. This is where you can control the model's specs. This is not the model that we will be working with, but I'm also probably going to include this model because I just love this guy's face. He's so hot. And here's control over the camera. Oops. If you want to look at this from a very low angle, and that's how your reference or illustration is, you want to look at it from a high angle. You want to introduce a third light source. I've limited it to only 3 light sources because that's pretty much all you need unless you want to have like 0 shadow in your image. You can zoom out, you can zoom in, and you can take a screenshot so that you guys can have the reference for when you paint. Screenshot. And I'm not going to talk about the other features because I'm going to leave the rest for the female model is going to be there as well in the next version that I show you guys. So I've been showing sneak peeks along development. But yeah, I can't wait till it comes out so we can use it. We're still going to be okay, and we can still there's a lot of space for development, a lot of space for improvement. So if you guys have anything you want to add, please let me know. Anything that you guys want. These are the last phases before we throw it into testing. So if you guys have anything you want to add, anything you want to critique, I'm all ears. This Portrait Studio app is just it's made for us. One thing just for us as artists, like one thing especially, like there's Photoshop, but it's for everybody, and there's Maya, and it's for everybody. But this is just for us. You know, it's just to make our lives a little bit easier. Please change the nipples. Okay. Okay, why don't you like the nipples? A team programmed it and developed it and modeled it. We all worked on it. Honestly, I've seen nipples that looks just like this. It will be collar and upwards in the final version. I'm not sure about that, actually. We still haven't agreed on that. I know some of you have trouble painting boobs. Let me ask an honest question. If there were boobs on the female model and you could change the size of the boobs, would you guys like that? Would you buy it just for the boobs? Let me get these notes down. Would you guys like the boob thing? Because I know boob references are very hard to find. Breasts are very difficult to shade and understand how they work in the light, especially secondary light source and reflection. So we probably will do a skin wrap where it makes it just a little bit more reflective, not enough to make it feel like plastic because skin is very mattified. But would you guys please make the nipples more like pancakes? Yes, no shame. Maybe. Boob sizage. Boob sizage. That's exactly what I wrote down. Pecs are hard. I'd buy for sternocleidomastoids and clavicles. I find those hard to shade. I see. Okay. I would buy it if it was only boobs. A beast cider will always sales. What? Add nipple scale. Okay. These are all very easy to add. Changing the size would be helpful. That way we can learn to understand them in different sizes. Googled boobs, found nothing. So yeah, we'll buy it boobs. It's not that we can't find anything on Google when it comes to boobs. It's that we can't find anything in the light source we need it. it's hard to find that exact customized light source. I've looked for years, like I've looked for models where you can, like a studio where you can control the light source. Usually it's all some sort of weird ass, badly developed thing that's not easy to use. This is all user friendly. It's stupid proof. And it's stupid proof because I get very frustrated when I'm looking at programs that are just too many buttons, too much shit in my way. I just want to get the stuff and take it into my painting because I've got Photoshop to deal with. So that's why I would want to have, that's why what it offers is so unique. Pics for men too, if possible. Pics or pecs? That's why it's not just a bust. I want to add the chest for now because I will add the body later. I just want to add the chest for now. Yeah, stupid proof because of me. Like the first time I jumped on 3ds Max or Maya, I was just like, oh my God, I just want to model and I want to just control the light source. Why do I have to learn all this stuff? And that's the awesome thing about this app. You don't have to go and learn Maya so you can access a sculpture. And you don't have to go to Michael's and buy $80 worth of clay so you can sculpt one yourself. And you don't have to go into an art store and buy a bust that isn't necessarily what you want it to, that you can't change its features, you can't make them softer, or so all the drawings you're ever going to draw are going to have this like manly robotic understanding of form in the face. That's why this app is awesome. It's like it's really organic, you can adjust a lot, it's really customizable. Possible to adjust muscle size. Okay. Seriously though, adjustable features on the model would be useful. Yeah, you have adjustable features. You can control the nose. We've already done that. How detailed are the ears? Pretty detailed. Let me take a look. Oops. Pretty detailed. Not as detailed as like there would be a couple more bumps and things here and there, but I think it's as important thinking about detail, scope, and the detail radius. The eyes definitely need to be more detailed than the nose. I mean, than the ears. You see these tiny little glitch problems? Those are the things that we're trying to smooth out now. What else? I look every day for boobs. Pure scientific, of course. Crouch area later. Sad. Packs the chest area for men. You can rotate the camera, I think. Drip skip, but I don't think I've seen it pose. How goofy can you make this face? Pretty damn goofy, Crowbit. Like, yeah, you have save states. You have 3 slots for saving states. They will be up here. This is not developed yet. This is still like a really early model of the program. But you have 3 slots for saving. Every time you open the thing, you just have to open the slot that you used before, and it will load the settings that you previously had. You can also go back to default settings on the models. Yes, poses can be saved. It would be cool at least to have positions like looking upward, down, left, right. That is rigging, and that's some really extensive stuff. If we do update, which we will host the file and have updates, we will probably add that into an update. Updates are coming after release that we're working on at the moment, or we're pretty much mapping out body, poses, rigs, and expressions. But expressions and direction of head, that's definitely in there. What are the format of the 3D models? Can we import other models? We have talked about that, and I think the answer to that for now is no. You cannot bring in other models. For now. Because then the other models, you would just have the basic other model. You wouldn't be able to program in the blend shapes and being able to control the expressions and the sizes. So you're bringing in a static model. So if we open the gates for that, I think we would have to create a separate program where you can, it's just an open studio where you can bring in your own 3D model and just control the light in there. But if you're already a modeler, you already have access to Maya. You already have access to whatever you're using to model, or Blender, or ZBrush. So you already have light sources accessible to you. So it would be kind of counterproductive if we have an open portrait or open studio for models that you make yourself. It wouldn't make sense. But if you like the format of this, if you like the non-busy, really, really clean interface, then we could probably do that. Open Studio. Do you guys like that idea? A separate open Portrait Studio without the pre-made models that we have, just so that you can bring in your own models. We would still have to develop that though. That's still way into the future. It might be useful to have sliders for bone protrusions like the cheekbones and the clavicle. You do have this. You have lots of control so far, just with what we have. Mouth width, mouth smallness, then the Neanderthal, nose size. This is just for this model. Nose height, smallness. Now it looks like Benedict Cumbersnatch. The bend of the nose. Damn it. Have that control. And the reason why we've made this face so universal is for specific, like, I don't want it to be specific to any race or ethnicity. I want it to be very universal shadows that you can use on any face you draw yourself. But there are differences in skeletal structure between male and female. That's why we have this, these two models. So you have the option of bringing in elf ears, making the ears really large, the flatness of the face. You have control over a lot right now. And collarbones, yes. Basically how skinny the upper body is, I know. I know why you need that, baby. The face looks a little different now. What else? A new app coming up. There is a mobile version that is workable, but we won't release that right away. Yeah, the mobile version, especially if you have a tablet, is cool if you guys do sketches by hand. If you guys work with sketchbooks, you can use the mobile app to just go on your couch or wherever it is you draw with your sketchbook. I'm just basing it off stuff that I do, and I think this would be a miracle if we can finally just finish it so I can use it myself. I'm so anxious to use it. Yes, we do. Would you guys, after I release the demo will be available on everyone listen, the demo will be available on istebrak.com. Will you guys be using the demo? Number one is my question. Will you play around with the demo? And once you play around with the demo, which will only be up for a month or 3 weeks, will you submit corrections? Will you submit ideas or changes and glitches? Will you guys be part of the beta testing? Because it'll be open on my website. Yes, you'll use the demo. The demo will be very limited with all the features. We're not going to upload the full version for many reasons. But I do need an okay that you guys will be part of that beta testing. You guys will be sending in it. There will be like on the website, we probably will see something like this. A tab specifically for, or on the store, a tab for the demo of Portrait Studio, a form submission right under it, and a sort of an opportunity for you guys to complain about it, to report some weird stuff, to offer suggestions. So if I get a yes from that, I will definitely do that. The demo will be embedded in the website. It will not be downloadable. If we can't figure out a way to do that, then we won't be offering a demo. Will this be purely grayscale? In future versions, would color be available? Yeah, I'd be part of beta testing. Yeah, I use to test the software. I like doing that, weirdly. You can control the color of the light sources. So the secondary light source right here, you can control its color. That way you know which areas, this is for a teaching tool. I mean, you can just change it to red or whatever, but you know which areas are really getting the light. In this case, the secondary light, which areas are being touched by the secondary light source. You can see the trace of the shadow of the secondary light source right here where there is no blue. And you can give this one color, and you see where that really happens. So blue is over here, and then the primary light source, of course it's the primary, has control of the visibility of the entire frame. So this is an excellent teaching tool for showing off how secondary and primary light sources interact and tackle each other. Light colors are already available with RGB sliders, but the model we are trying to keep neutral for now. Yes, I would keep it in grayscale because this is a learning tool. If I keep it in grayscale, it'll stay more universal. This is the sort of statement, like the general attitude we're working with this app. We are trying to keep it as universal as possible. Universal with features, universal with grayscales, very clean interface, and like I said, stupid proof. Very, very easy. Get in, get out, get your reference, and go start painting. That's what it's all about. Nothing excessive, nothing over the top. Really, really minimal. Minimalist is how we're thinking here. Yes, it's going to be released for PC and Mac. We will have a version for both. The price. What would you guys, I know some of you already know the price, but what would you guys think a fair price would be? It's running on PC right now, but it will be available on Mac, yeah. I don't have a Mac to test it on. I don't use Mac, unfortunately. Fortunately. The price is going to be somewhere between 35 and 50. Might be a little bit over 50. It is pricey, but it's something that you might use for a long time, and we will have access to updates as we develop it. 5.5 fucking K. I'd pay 30 to 50. $5 to $10. Okay. $30. I see. $30 going once, going twice. We still have to get in touch with a lot of licensing info and release, and but if we can, we will. If we know that there's a wide audience involved in it, and I guess marketing and all of that stuff, we might drop the price to be a little bit lower. But it depends. It depends on a lot of factors go into what the price is going to be for this. This has been in development since probably August. Is it? That's when I first started talking about it, in August. I think. I'm not sure. Or June or July. I don't remember. Sometime in the summer, we've just been going back and forth between, like, we've gone through so many models already, so many bad versions of this, and it's been a while that we've been developing this very, very simple but effective app. So we will see. We'll try to keep the price fair. Trying to stay as transparent as possible with you guys. It's all about you, and you guys have formed this community, so it's all about your input is very, very important. I know, Dagurto, me too. And I was like, you know what, I'm done looking for it. I'm ready. I'm ready to make this. So thank you everyone for watching. Next week will be class. This week, Thursday, will be more material study and form study discussion. Please do homework and submit it on Google Community. Thanks everyone for coming. You guys are great. I will see you guys on Thursday. Have a great week. Bye-bye.